Hello everyone, today we're going to be looking at processing a film in the processing hub of the Northern Centre of Photography. Open up the film canister, take the film retrieval kind of device we've got here, and then simply kind of just open it up a little bit there to close those pincers. And then when we push down, you'll hear it pop open, and then the end will come off. You just be careful with your fingers because that can be sharp. Just pull it out and you'll retrieve the film. Keep some pressure on to stop it from all unravelling. Now this is what I tend to do. Again, there's different ways that you can do this, but again you've got to be careful because you're working in the pitch black when you're doing this. But you can take your scissors, I open the scissors up and I put the edge of the scissors along my finger so I'm not going to cut onto those fingers. Make sure that my fingers are out the way. And I can feel the back of the scissors to know that my fingers are out of the way. And then you can get a clean cut along that way to ensure that you've got an easier edge from the leader to get load onto the film. So the next thing I'm going to do then is get hold of the spiral and just line up these two mounts that we've got there with the ball bearings behind them so you can easily feed the film onto them there. Now again, it's much easier in the light. Obviously I can see what I'm doing now, so you've got to practice this in the dark. And what you've got to do basically is get it across those bearings and bring it across by about 3 or 4 inches. And then I just let that drop down into my hand, so I'm keeping it from hitting the floor and getting dusty. And then gently holding one in place, move one back, rotate it back so it picks it up on the spiral, then loads it forward onto it, and just keep repeating that process. So I'm putting my thumb, a gentle bit of pressure on those rebits every time, as you can see, to load it up. And then when you get going, don't go too fast with this, but you can see you just keep going and going. And I'm just using my thumb, as you can see, that as an extra little bit of a guide, so I can feel it in the dark it's going onto that spiral in the right way. And I keep on doing that. And then towards the end, as you can see, it'll get stuck. And now I can use, once I've got this position here, I can use those scissors again. Again, being very careful, I'm keeping my fingers out of the way in order to do this. Cut that across, then give it another couple of turns just to make sure it's not catching one of the negatives there like that. So once we've got it like this, you can then put on the central column. Push it all the way home, make sure it's tight and it's not going to move up and down there, so it stays in the development. It's got to be nice and tight. And that then sits inside of the tank. Once we put on the funnel, this will sit in that hole to make it light tight. So it sits on and it rotates and it'll feel loose, but you'll hear it kind of click into position. And that now is light tight. So we put this on as a precaution as we're moving through the space. So this is the lid, what keeps the chemistry in, and we push it down all the way like this. So once you've got your film loaded like this in the tank, it's now ready for you to bring back from the loading areas, which we use in the colour darkroom bays, or you can use one of the little tents that we've got if you don't want to go into one of those enclosed spaces. And then we can then simply take this and move it to the processing area. Okay, so now we've got the film loaded, we need to work in the processing area to ensure that we've got a safe environment to do the actual processing of the film. So this is what we call the wet area, the processing area. It's got all the chemistry that we need in here and the kind of drainage area that we need to safely process the film. So this I'm just going to lay it in here for now, in there, out of the way, and talk about the different chemistry that we need. So there's a 3 process of the chemistry and then the wash at the end. So we have the developer first, and then it goes into the stop bath, which actually just stops that development process. And then finally we have the fixer, which fixes that negative, the image of it, the crystal halides, to the actual gelatin base. So we've got this 3-stage process, always goes in this order. Now we need to kind of mix up the chemistry to the right amount for a film that we're working with. And for one roll of 35mm film, we need 300 millilitres of liquid, of solution. So with the developer, this is Coda Xtol, and we use this on a 1-to-1 mix. So that means that it's 150 millilitres of chemistry of the developer with 150 millilitres of water. And the development is really critical in terms of the temperature of that chemistry. So it needs to be 20 degrees C to be at that kind of operational level for it to do its job properly. So I'm going to set this up now so you can see how this works. First of all, going to get the warm tap running. Just going to move that out of the way. And just make sure that that's kind of lukewarm when it starts to come out there. So we can start this process. And I'm looking to get 150 millilitres of water in here at about 20 degrees C or thereabouts. So maybe it's even just a bit warmer because the chemistry might be a bit colder this time of year. So use the thermometer, make sure that everything's washed out beforehand when we start. Hold the thermometer at the top so you're not kind of changing the chemistry of it. And then you can get an accurate reading from there. So I'm going to speed things up today a little bit because it might take it a few minutes to get this right. So I can see that's a bit warm, that's about 25 degrees there. So I'm just going to introduce a bit of cold, give that a quick stir, give it a minute or so to settle back down to get an accurate reading. Okay, so I'll keep on doing that. Once I'm happy with that temperature, and that's coming in now at 20 degrees C, I can turn that off and then I can make sure I've got the right amount of chemistry in there. So I'm doing that by leaving it on this level surface to check, because if you're doing it like this you can get the wrong reading and then get it drastically wrong. So make sure it's level and it's flat, and I can see I've got too much in there, so I'm just going to pour that out until I've got the right measurement, and that's coming in now at 150 millilitres. So the next thing I'll do is top that up now to 300 millilitres with the additional chemistry. So I'm now going to pour in the X12, open that up, one of this, there we go, and once I've got it to 300 millilitres, I can give it a quick stir, and I can finally just double check that temperature to make sure it's not shifted. And that's coming in now, that's perfect at 20 degrees, so it's absolutely accurate for a one. If you find, for whatever reason, the chemistry is too hot, if it's that combined temperature is coming in, like say 22 degrees, all you can do, dead easy, is turn on the cold tap, run it under like this, so it's not going into the chemistry, but that water is taking the heat out of it that way. It's dispersing the heat from that chemistry as it runs off it. And that will take it down, keep monitoring with the thermostat, and it'll get you the right temperature. If it's too cold, simply do the reverse of that, put the hot tap on, let that heat dissipate inside to the chemistry without putting additional water into the chemistry, and that'll get you the right temperature very, very quickly. Okay, so the next thing we do is just use the stop. So for that, we just measure it out, we pour straight up, we reuse both. We should say that the developer is a one-shot developer. We use it once and then we throw it away, dispose it down the sink. For the stock bath and the fixer, we reuse them until they become exhausted. So the fixer has a very pleasant colour, as you can see. So we know that this is the operational colour for this particular chemistry. When it begins to get exhausted, it changes from this and begins to build up a slight purple hue. The more it gets exhausted, the more purple it becomes as well. So I've measured about 300 millilitres of that. The fixer again, it should look like this. It's very kind of clear in its consistency. It starts to pick up a little kind of purple hue as it gets a bit exhausted. But there's another way we can check to make sure your films are fixed at the end of that process, which I'll describe in a few minutes. So I've got all the chemistry measured out in the right order. So when I start the timings of this, it's going to be all kind of accurate in that regard. So the next thing that we will do, you can use this clocks around the department, or actually I think even better these days is to just use your mobile phone and set a timer on there for your development times, your processing times. So the developer has a different amount of time that we need depending on the film that we're working with. So for this example I'm working with HP5, so you can check against this list of all the processing times that we've got here, and you can read off where it is. HP5, it's 400 ISO, it's a 1-to-1 mix, which is what we've done earlier, the 150 millimeters each of liquid to get the 300 of the working chemistry, and that's going to give us a 12-minute development time. Anyone working with FP4, you'll see it's 10 minutes, so that can massively change it if you get those timings wrong. So make sure you double check the timings before you start. So now we've got this, we can begin to remove the lid, and I will set that timer on on the phone is about to start now, so you can kind of do that timing so you've got your countdown for these 12 minutes of development time. So I would have that ready to go as soon as I pour this chemistry in. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to simply gently kind of pour in the developer now, and as soon as I do that, I would then get the lid on and hit that button to set that timer off. You'll see what I'll do it on out here. You wouldn't ordinarily do it out here, you would do it in there, but I'm just pushing down to get that in. And then straight away we give it, you know, a series of inversions, turning the tank upside down like this to let that chemistry wash through it for about the first 30 seconds or so to get going. So we're ensuring that all that chemistry is now flowing between that spiral and all of that film is getting exposed to chemistry now. Okay, so once we've done that, inside here, and I'll just demonstrate on the top, but normally we do it in there so you can see, I'm just giving it a couple of little taps there. We'll do it in there normally like that. And that's just releasing any air bells that have stuck to the film so that we don't get these kind of air bell marks on there. So we'll just do that after each series of inversions, a couple of little gentle taps to release any bubbles to stop them interacting with that. Now I'm going to speed this process up so you can kind of imagine what it would be like for these 12 minutes. I'm just going to rush through it so you can see the process in a few minutes. So we imagine I'm doing that, and every minute of that development time I'll pick up the tank and I will give it 10 more inversions. So keep on going for this. And then again, give it a couple of taps, just get those air bells off. And then let it sit then for the rest of that minute. And you repeat that process every minute until the 12 minutes are up. If you overdo it, you can find you can overdevelop parts of the negative. You'll get kind of some lines running through there from the rebates where it's been overactive. So keep to that kind of system and you'll be fine. So again, just to hypothetically speed this along, I'm now coming to the end of that 12 minutes. The alarm's about to go off. I'm ready for that now. So I'll take off the lid and I'll go to the edge of the sink and then pour away the chemistry now that we no longer need to develop, because it's now done its job. And because I've already got it measured out, I can quickly move straight on and then pour in the stop bath. So the stop goes in, runs in, again you add the lid, push down and make sure it's all secure all the way around. And then again, just give it those inversions, and we're doing this for 1 minute. So give it the inversions for 30 seconds, as we've done previously, to make sure that stop is actually doing what it says on the tin. It stops the processing, that development processing, extremely quickly within that. So once you've done that, again, just give it a couple of gentle taps, let it sit there and do its job for that rest of the minute. And then when it's done, all we do then is take off the lid, and then we pour that back into the funnel for the stop bath. So we're reusing it until it changes colour, until it starts to go that purple colour I mentioned a bit earlier. And then we come to the final stage of that processing. Again, it's already measured out with a fix. Put this in, let it run in, get the lid on, push down to make sure that nothing's going to kind of leak out around it. Okay, and you can see there, just give it those inversions again for that first 30 seconds, and then give it that tap, the taps, let it sit for the rest of that minute, and this needs to happen for 8 minutes. So every minute, just as with the developer, you'll pick it up and give it 10 more inversions every minute, just carefully kind of doing that. And you can see there is some liquid in the bottom of the sink there as well, just picking up, so it's not leaking from this container, it's coming from the actual sink, the chemistry, the water what's on there. Again, a little tap and leave it there for the 8 minutes. So once it's done, again 8 minutes, you imagine that time has gone off, we now pour it back in there, and then we're ready to go to the next stage, which is the wash. So before we get to that stage, I'm going to just remove the funnel and take out the spiral. Now at this stage, when you do this, you can just double check before you do anything else to make sure it's properly fixed, because if the chemistry is starting to get a bit weaker, it might not have fixed properly. And the way you tell is just to simply remove the edge of the filament, have a look through it there, and you should see it's quite clear in areas where it hasn't been exposed, so you can see through it. If it's looking smoky or milky and you can't quite see through it all, then you'll need more fix. If you're not sure, it's got this kind of whitish colour to the back or a smoky kind of grey colour to it. It's not quite right. So if you're not sure, get the technicians, ask them to have a quick look at it and check. The main thing is if it's like that, at that stage, put it straight back in and make it light tight again so that we can get some fresh chemistry mix and we can kind of get it fixed at that point. But ordinarily, for the vast majority of the time, because we don't need to change it that often, the film will look pretty good and it'll be ready to go to the wash. So that's what we're going to pick up in this next bit. So we're now transferring into the wash part of the processing area. So we're going to leave the film on this spiral for the time being, and we're going to fill it up with some cold water. So just gently run it to fill it up with cold water. Now there are just different schools of thought on this. Some of them are you just leave it gently running with cold water and you can leave it there for 10 minutes or so and keep kind of changing the water out every few minutes or something like that. But actually Ilford have recently kind of made a shift to make it more environmentally friendly with how much water we're using with the production of these things now. So what they're recommending is there's a series of inversions that we can do with just a few water changes to get it adequately shifted and ready for it. So what we're going to do is fill it up 3/4 full, and I'm going to use the lid, put the lid back on there, and what they're suggesting is we do 5 inversions first of all to get rid of that kind of vast majority of the chemistry there. So we give it 5 inversions, then pour that out, and then refill it, some fresh water. Again, about 3/4 full, so it can actually have some space to move around on the negatives. And we do that again, and this time we do it for 10 inversions. So once we've done that, pour it out, put in some fresh water again. Again, 3/4 full, and this time a little bit slower, just take your time, and now we're going to do 20 inversions. Okay, so just keep through this process, and once you get to the end of those 20 inversions, which we'll assume I've done that now, you would then pour out that wash, and we would then get ready for the final stage of this now, which is where we introduce some of the wetting agent. So the wetting agent, we've got some here, is basically some chemistry that we use to soften this water quality so we have lots of mineral content in the water, and when it dries on the negatives it leaves these water marks, which we'll talk about removing in a future video. One thing we can do to minimise the amount of water what stays on the negatives is to use some wetting agent. So we'll basically kind of fill this up with water again for a last time. Again, 3/4 full, and this time I'm just going to put a drop. It's all we need because it's quite potent, this stuff. Just put a drop in there, that's it, a couple of drops at most, like that. And then get that lid back on and gently give it some inversions. And what you'll find is that now is going to start to froth up in the water. So we'll see that when we remove it. So give it again, another 10 or so inversions, something like that. And then when I take that lid off, you can see hopefully all the bubbles that we've got in there now as it begins to froth up. So then you can just take out the filler ready to go. Before I do that, I'm going to give my hands a quick rinse in some warm water to get any grease or muck off my fingers as well, as I'm going to get it ready now to put into the cabinets. So I'll take it off, give it a quick shake to get rid of any excess water there. Holding the spirals, you can then simply push one towards you, and then you can remove it like this, and we can see the spiral is now ready to take off. So I'm just taking it in one hand like this, holding it at the end there and on the rebates, and I'm simply going to drop it down like that so it doesn't come into contact with any surface or any water, any kind of the bottom, so it's not picking up any mess. I'm going to quickly just use my fingers there because they're clean, and gently, very gently, don't overdo this, just gently rub it down like that to squeeze it down to get rid of any excess water, and that'll do. We don't use tongs. I mean, you can use them, but What I find when I use things like this is they can get, this one you can see it's already it's got muck on there, they get, you can go too hard, you can really damage and scratch the negatives. So I've seen some good films completely ruined by people being too aggressive with these squeegees and just kind of completely ruining, scratching an entire roll of film. So this is now ready to hang up, but before we do that in the dryer, just show you a couple of things we can do. So when we put these up to dry in the drying cabinet, we need to make sure, you've got to watch these, they're quite sharp. So you put them on there, push them home, and that'll keep it fixed within there. What I'm going to do as well, and again being very careful, I'm just holding the rebates here so I'm not damaging anything, I'm not putting fingerprints on the negative. I'm going to put one at the other end as well. And the reason for that is just to make sure it stays flat and it doesn't curl up on itself when it goes into the drying cabinet, which is where we'll go next. Okay, so once we get to the drying cabinet, simply open it up, place it on there, making sure it doesn't come into contact with anyone else's, and then we put it onto a medium heat, which is the top one of this little kind of set of controls at the bottom. Put it on for 30 minutes and let that run. So that'll now stay like this until we get to the end of the 30 minutes and it's dry. So once it's dried, we can then move it round to the film cutting area, which is over here. And once we're there, we make sure that this surface is clean first. So we'll always get a little bit of the cloth, a clean bit of cloth, before we actually start this, and then push it on just to get rid of any dust, get a bit of water on there if you need to, first of all, to make sure it's getting all the dust up, but it must be clean and it must be dry when you do this. So the next thing you'll do is get yourself one of these bags, a neg bag, which you can just get by the side of the cupboard there for the drying cabinets. Lie your film down and then cut them into little strips of 6. Like this on this clean tabletop that you've got. Be really careful to hold them only by the rebate so you're not getting any greasy fingerprints or dust marks on them as well. Once you've got them cut, carefully put a little bit of pressure on them to bend them slightly. You'll find they'll fit straight into these slots and then push them in. Again, being very careful not to touch the negatives themselves, just the rebates. And keep filling up that, and there you'll see that's your now completely developed, processed and washed film, cut up, ready to go into the darkroom for the next session that we'll be doing. So it's pretty easy once you get going with this, but things can go wrong. Don't worry if they do. Learn by those mistakes and get it right for the next time you do it. Okay, so good luck with that, and we look forward to seeing your results very soon. Thank you.